When it comes to Portland's homeless problem, Portland City Council member Rene Gonzalez is not afraid to say no. He was elected this past November. He's a breath of fresh air for many hoping for change in Portland. Gonzalez recently ordered one of the agencies that he oversees, it's called the Portland Street Response. He ordered them to stop handing out free tents and tarps to homeless people. The blowback was withering, but he is standing his ground. I talked with him about his reasoning earlier this week.
And I'm going to give you a little bit of data on this. It's high level. Over 40% of our fire deaths are in the homeless community. Over 40% of our fire burns are in the homeless community. Over 40% of our call volume related to fires comes out of the homeless community. And so we're seeing an incredible clustering of volume that our fire department has to respond to. And giving someone a tent without addressing a real heating source is a recipe for a certain amount of tent fires, which leads to, unfortunately, way too many bad fire injuries and in some cases death. And so they came back pretty decisively on that recommendation. And I probably came in also with some preconceived notions. You know, I have deep concern even before we got into this whole topic about fire injuries and deaths, about how tents that are being handed out in the city are being utilized. How many are being used for illegal activity? How many are being used for drug dens? Is it enabling certain behaviors we don't want to occur in the city? That was my perception as a new elected. And when you had the fire department come in and saying very decisively, we don't want anyone associated with us handing out tents in an unsanctioned environment, it was a pretty straightforward decision for us.
And is the fire danger because people are out there, they're getting cold, so they get kerosene or a candle or something like that, and then the tent catches fire?
Yeah, they'll sometimes burn hand sanitizer in a small can. And there was a horrific burn, I believe, last weekend. 40% of the woman's body was now burned, and it was just accidentally knocking over a heating source inside their tent. And then you couple it with the high rates of mental illness and substance use disorder, heavy drug use in many of our unsanctioned camps. This is just a recipe for danger, right? It's that tent will not protect you from severe cold by itself. You've got to generate some other heating source. So even if you're not suffering from mental illness or addiction or heavy drug use, you're going to have to solve this separate heat problem. And you throw in those other factors, it's a very, very dangerous environment.
Gonzalez is in charge of the Fire Bureau for Portland, so he's been thinking very deeply about this. One firefighter told me, we used to respond to addresses. Now more and more we respond to locations. So what that means is addresses would be apartments, condos, homes, things like that. Locations, that's mostly homeless related. Portland Fire and Rescue, by the way, responded to roughly 2,000 homeless-related fires in the year 2022. That averages out to more than 5 every single day. Gonzalez is a lawyer. He opened his own law firm, and he also owned a software business here in Portland. That all happened before he was elected to the city council, so he's a very smart guy. He told me that when he took office this past fall, he did not know that this agency he's now in charge of, the Portland Street Response, was giving out all these free tents and tarps. The agency is part of the Fire Bureau and is meant to be a resource that could be sent instead of the police for people having mental health crisis. Gonzalez believes that handing out tents is not part of that. He ordered Portland Street Response to stop giving out the tents. I challenged him on that decision, though, since he made it in the middle of winter when people were in danger of freezing to death. But I could hear people saying, you did this during the winter when people are exposed to the cold. They're going to die out there without those tents to protect them.
You know, we looked back at the spike in hypothermia deaths the year before when we were handing out something like 7 tents per homeless person in the city of Portland. And that's the joint offices numbers over that period. So we were seeing increases in hypothermia while our region was handing out record amounts of tents and tarps. And so just don't find it compelling that that's really an effective way to address it. Where we're putting our energies into is getting folks off the streets into warming shelters when we have them. We have made a commitment in our region that we will expand capacity to meet no matter what the need is during those warming needs. And so we're also increasing transportation in the last cold spell. Both Chat and Portland Street Response are actually involved in transporting some folks off the streets directly to our shelters. We think that's the right direction. Get them in a safe place that actually has safe heating sources is the better way to protect against the cold.
So, no, he's not going to change his mind on that one. And yes, he said there are still other nonprofits giving away other free tents to the homeless. And by the way, if you're frustrated on how much of your tax money is being used to clean up the mess on the streets, tents, and other garbage, so is he.
It's this horrible cycle. I mean, depending on how you count it, let's start with, we're spending a minimum of $12 million a year on cleaning up unsanctioned camps in the city of Portland. That's just the city.
That's just the cleanup.
And then that's just the cleanup. That's not our comprehensive, spend on the homeless problem. And so for a taxpayer to be spending, and that's a minimum number. There's some arguments that's understating the true cleanup costs. To be spending that much on cleanups on the one hand and then handing out the tents and tarps on the other, it just doesn't sit well from a financial stewardship perspective. And then you throw in some of the other things that we witness, whether we can quantify, it's a lot harder. How many of those tents are being used for illegal activities? How many of them are being used for really self-destructive high drug use? And that's when it's harder to quantify that, but we certainly witness it on our streets every day. And just couldn't participate in that going forward, at least not under a bureau I manage.
So there it is, a new tone coming from at least one member at Portland City Hall. Tomorrow night, I'll talk with the commissioner about his view that the Portland area has become too tolerant of bad behavior and his order that Portland Street Response also be available for homeless folks who are in distress during the clearing of camps, or so-called sweeps. Many in that agency do not want to do that. Finally, we'll talk about whether too many people are coming to the Portland area because it's easier to camp outside and use drugs. Again, look for that story tomorrow night, right here at 6 o'clock. In the meantime, we want to hear from you about this as well. Do you like his attitude and his positions? Not so much. Either one's fine. Send me your thoughts, though. The email is thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. I look forward to hearing from you.